All right, hey everybody. Welcome back to a fabulous new week here. Starting new information for Unit 5, and this next couple of days will be about elections. And there'll be two parts to today. They won't be really long, but I just want to make sure I get them all in with the information you need. So we start with this part. We'll talk about types of elections. There are two different types of elections to get candidates. They're called primaries or caucuses. And they determine the party's nominee to run in what we call the general election. So we're starting with some of these terms that we need to know. The general election is the main election to determine which candidate who will take the office. So you have primaries or caucuses early that determines who the candidates are. So it whittles it down from a bunch of Democrats to one and a bunch of Republicans to one, and then they run off in the general election. They run for the office. That is the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. That's when general elections are. For the presidential election, that date comes from the Constitution. So everything else lines up. Even what we call the off year or the midterm elections still occur generally on those days. Um, and then again, we have a term we call presidential election, right? Every 4 years. One of the major concepts you have to understand here is that you need to know that the highest turnouts that we have in the United States are for those presidential elections. Okay, so the midterms then, sometimes called off-year elections. Usually we call it midterm, and the mid refers to the time between the president, right? Between the presidential elections, so the midterm of the president. So remember, elections are held every 2 years. After the presidential elections, those are the midterms. And again, remember, all representatives are up because they're up every 2 years anyway, all 435 of them, and then 1/3 of the Senate every 2 years as well. So you got presidential elections, and then you got midterm elections. And they have their different functions. The big function is presidential elections has the presidential election in it. Turnout for midterms, again, you have to know this is like the last slide said, the highest turnouts for president. So turnout for midterms is always lower than the turnout in presidential election years. This trend you have to understand, okay? You have to know this backwards and forwards. In the first election after a new president, the party of the president usually loses seats in the House, especially, and the Senate sometimes. So what that means is, in 2022, the next midterm, the expectation will be that the Democrats will lose seats in the House and lose seats in the Senate. Okay, and that is the trend, and we're going to go back. It's actually the trend since 1992 and probably before that. But you're going to see a chart from that, and I'll mention that here momentarily. You don't need to know these numbers here, but I'll just tell you in 2010, first midterm after Obama, 63 seat gain for Republicans. In 1994, first midterm after Clinton, Republicans gained 52 seats. 2018, first midterm after Trump, net gain of 41 seats for the Democrats. So this happens. Okay, you have to know that trend. You must know that trend. Okay, and the only exception to this entire trend since 1992 is the 2002 midterm. That was the first midterm after Bush. Republicans actually gained 7 seats, but the reason was because of 9/11. If 9/11 hadn't happened, the patterns would have most likely held. And so this chart here will just show you that pattern really quick. You can see the big ones. 1994, that massive change. It's Democrats in blue, Republicans in red. Big change for the majority in 1994. You can see the 2002 exception. Okay, the 2006 is not a midterm with the standards that we just used. It is a midterm, and a change did happen. 2010, again, you can see that big change after the first election after Obama. If we had the 2018 on there, you saw the numbers on the last one, then we would see the same thing with that. So that trend has to hold. That trend is something you have to know. Okay. All right. A couple more slides for this one. Nominations. So the official endorsement of the candidate for office by a political party, that is the nomination. So it's usually we refer to this with the presidential elections, but it also is for senators. Senators get the nomination, representatives get the nomination whatever. Then they're going to run in the general election. Sometimes it can be harder, especially if it's a presidential election, because there are several candidates, sometimes many candidates, whittled down to two, one from each party. 2016, remember the Republicans had 15 or 17 candidates trying to get the nomination for president. The Democrats in 2016 had a few less, but they also had that competition. 2020, there were over 20 candidates for president on the Democratic side looking for that nomination. So sometimes it can be harder to win that than maybe the general election. So again, then candidates from each party compete for each other. This is the nomination for president then. Candidates in each party compete against each other for a majority of what we call delegates. Those primary or caucus elections for president, what they are doing is actually looking for delegates. So when you vote in Georgia, if you vote in the Democratic primary for Georgia in 2020, if you voted for Biden, you voted for delegates for Biden at the convention. If you voted for Sanders, you voted for delegates for Sanders at the convention. Okay, we'll talk more about the convention in the next part of today. Parties use different systems for allocating delegates. You used to have to know this stuff in much more detail. This is all you have to know now. They use different systems. The Democrats use a proportional system. The Republicans use a form of winner take all, not 100%. So the Democrats, that proportional thing for the Democrats is, if Biden gets 40% of Georgia, he gets 40% of Georgia's delegates. Sanders gets 30%, he gets 30% of the delegates, that kind of thing. A little bit different for the Republicans. If Republicans get a certain amount, then they end up getting all of them instead of dividing them up. But that's as much in the weeds as you need to know. Elections, of course, are spread from February to June. And we're going to talk about a concept called front loading shortly. But that means, so you get the Iowa caucuses in February, and then the New Hampshire primary in February, then a boatload of them in March, and then they can spread all the way through June. And there are two ways to compete for states' delegates, a caucus or a primary. And we're going to talk about the caucus on the next slide, and then we'll pick up with primary in the next part. Okay, the caucus is the one that is not familiar to us because it's not like regular elections that we really know of, whether it's general or in Georgia we do primaries. A caucus is open to all registered party voters in the state, so you have to be a party member to vote in a caucus. Okay, there are only 12 states and territories do this, so that's why it's rarer, which is why we spend a little more time on it so you understand it. Iowa, of course, is the most famous because it's first, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later in today as well. It is very, very grassroots oriented. People who attend tend to be very committed. These are the most partisan people there are because they are doing this, and you'll see in the next couple of bullets, you'll see why this takes a dedicated party committed person, because it takes time. You actually have to go to the meeting. They're held at the precinct or county level, which however the state works it out, and it's meetings and it's speeches and it's trying to get other people, convince them to come to your side. They can last for hours. This is why it's not just walking in and voting and leaving like a primary is or a general election. These can last hours. Speeches are made, votes taken, and you'll see you have 3 videos to watch today. That'll be your assignment. And it's all about caucuses. One is about just sort of describing them, and then 2 of them are from different areas of 20 of the 2008 caucuses in Iowa. And you'll see what I mean. This is what we mean by it takes dedicated people to do this, because it takes time, okay? You'll see that candidates get eliminated on successive votes until the precinct county decides on who they support, a certain level, a certain percentage candidates that we'll call viable. You'll see that in the videos today. You'll see what we mean by viability. And then if they're not viable, then those people have to disperse and find other candidates that are viable. Those results then get to the state party, and the candidate then gets the support of the delegations. You might come out with Clinton getting 40% of Iowa and Sanders getting 36%, and Edwards getting, this was for 2008, Edwards getting 20% or something like that. And that's the way the caucus will end. So we'll pick up after this on for nominations. I'm sorry, for primaries, and then we'll finish that. We'll talk about the system, and then you'll, like I said, you'll have caucus videos to watch. So that's your only assignment then today. So I'll see you.